Hello everyone and welcome back to the 3T Path channel. Welcome back to our Uddhava-gita course. So we are here in this chapter where Krishna is giving this classic description of the two birds in a tree to describe the presence of the individual soul and the supersoul within the body. Very classic understanding. Now he's going to expand on this and talk more about how the soul is not the doer. Very difficult concept to grasp, but a very important concept nonetheless. And the concept is that you, as a transcendental living being, you're actually not doing things here in matter because you are not made of matter. You're of a completely different class of reality. You're a transcendental being. But anyway, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And if you want to catch up on the rest of the Uddhava-gita course, make sure you become a member of this channel. The instructions are here in the description, not just subscribe, but a member of the channel. And then you can access the entire Uddhava-gita course at your leisure. Okay, so here we are in the 11th canto, 11th chapter, verse 7. So Krishna in verse 6 just mentioned the two birds in the tree, and now he's going to explain a little more about these two birds in the tree. The bird who does not eat the fruits of the tree is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who by his omniscience perfectly understands his own position and that of the conditioned living entity, represented by the eating bird. That living entity, on the other hand, does not understand himself or the Lord. He is covered by avidya, ignorance, and is thus called eternally conditioned. Whereas the personality of Godhead, being full of perfect knowledge, is eternally liberated. So here's some important concepts. First, we talked about this. Avidya, very important word, avidya, very classic concept, not only in yoga, but also in Buddhism and all of East Asian spirituality. And the problem of the source, the root of all problems is avidya. Avidya is translated as ignorance, vidya, Vedas, knowledge, avidya, lack of knowledge, but it's not just ignorance, like the English term ignorance doesn't quite capture it. Avidya is more than that. It's a mystic lack of awareness. It's a mystical inability to see things as they are almost. So avidya, not understanding, like a profound lack of understanding which leads to an existential position of suffering. That's what avidya is. So in this tree, the little individual soul, that's you and me, by the way, we are in avidya, we're in ignorance, we're not aware of ourselves, of our true nature, and, vidyas are forgetting God. They're in forgetfulness of God. So they're just sitting there trying to enjoy the world. This is the soul trying to enjoy the world. You get it, right? The bird eating the fruits of the tree. That's what it is. So it's this person who is just not aware, just not thinking about his transcendental nature. He's just trying to enjoy the fruits of the world, a materialist, which is what most people are in this world. So that person is just trying to enjoy the world, unaware of his own nature, his or her own nature, and unaware of the existence and the nature of God. So then, because of avidya, you have this term Bhada, Nitya Bhada. Nitya, eternally, Bhada, bound. But again, as I explained in the other class, in the previous class, this Nitya Bhada, eternally conditioned, means eternally until you do something about it. Until you do something about it. So since time immemorial, you've been Bhada. Here we are trapped in samskara, taking birth after birth after birth in the ocean of birth and death. suffering because of avidya, and because of avidya then we developed all these other things. It's, kama, krodha, envy, anger, desires, and the endless host of problems because of it. But the root is avidya. And so since time immemorial, baddha, condition. But of course, Krishna came and is explaining Uddhava-gita so you can stop being baddha. Right? The whole point of this is just not just so you're eternally bound and that's it, surrender to your fate. No, you do something about it. And now we, with the power of knowledge, because what's going to combat avidya? Vidya, knowledge. And here we are receiving this vidya, this exact vidya you need, this knowledge you need to combat avidya is being given to you in the form of Bhagavad-gita, now here Uddhava-gita, of course the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, and this is our source of vidya. So now we combat avidya, and therefore we won't necessarily have to be eternally bound, nitya baddha anymore. We can become free. However, the Lord, God doesn't have a problem with vidya because all knowledge comes from Him. There's this interesting verse in Bhagavad-gita, verse 15:15, where Krishna says, all knowledge comes from me. So all knowledge, all remembrance, all knowledge comes from me. I am the source of forgetfulness, knowledge, remembrance. It all comes from me. And I am the compiler of it. I know the Vedas, I'm the Vedanta, this all from me. So, in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says he is Gyeya, he is the object of knowledge. Not only does he have Jnana, he is Gyeya, he is the object of knowledge. So, God doesn't have any knowledge issues because it all comes from him anyway. So, because he has full and perfect knowledge, he is Nitya Mukta, eternally liberated, Nitya Mukta. And then of course you can be Nitya Mukta as well when you take Uddhava-gita into your life. Purport. The word Vidyamaya in this verse indicates the internal potency of the Lord and not the external potency, Mahamaya. Within the material world there's Vidya, or material science, and Avidya, or material ignorance. But in this verse, Vidya means the internal spiritual knowledge by which the personality of Godhead is fixed in omniscience. The example of two birds in a tree, which is given in many Vedic literatures, demonstrates the statement Nityo Nityanam. There are two categories of eternal living entities. Very important to understand this. A lot of people, because of the influence of Advaita Vedanta, fail to understand this statement from the Vedas. There are two eternal categories of existence, of conscious beings. Two. Okay? Two birds in the tree, two categories of existence. Namely, the Supreme Lord and the minute Jiva soul, that's you and me. There's two categories, and Krishna is very clear about this in Bhagavad-gita. If you just read the Gita, proper literal translation, you can very clearly understand. If you do my Bhagavad-gita course, you can see all the verses where Krishna so carefully explains this concept in chapter 13, chapter 15. He really he goes out of his way to explain this important concept. Very important. You don't confuse yourself, think yourself as God, which makes no sense. How could God? Krishna just said right here, because I am full of perfect knowledge, I am eternally liberated. How could you become fooled by Maya, by nature? How could you fall into avidya if you were God? It wouldn't make any sense. What power would be greater than God to make him become ignorant? It makes no sense. But because we're minute particles of God, we're minute entities, then we can become overwhelmed because we're just minute, infinitesimal units of consciousness. Not like God, who is the source of all, infinite. We are minute, infinitesimal. So yes, we can become covered by this energy, which is God's energy, matter. We can. That makes sense, right? We're minute, infinitesimal. We can become covered by the energy of one who is infinite, who is the source of all power. Yes, that makes sense, right? That's not an irrational concept. It's easy to digest that, yes. So it makes more sense. And then, of course, as minute individual beings, we can then, and we're doing our own trajectory. I'm doing my trajectory, doing your trajectory. We both happen to be cruising through planet Earth at this time, but I'm coming from one, you coming from another, and from here I'm trying to go back home, back to God. I don't know what you're doing, but so we're all doing our own paths because we are individuals. If I was God, and then how would I be liberated and you still be not liberated? How does that even make sense? It's just gibberish. So it goes against what the scripture says. It goes against just good sense, just rational, down to earth sense. It doesn't make sense. So the statement is nityo nityanam. There's two kinds of nitya, two kinds of eternal beings, okay? Nityo nityanam. There are two categories of living beings, the Supreme Lord and the Jiva Soul. The conditioned Jiva Soul, forgetting his identity as an eternal loving servant of the Lord, tries to enjoy the fruits of his own activities and thus comes under the spell of avidya, ignorance. This bondage of avidya, ignorance, has existed since time immemorial and can be rectified only by one's taking to the loving devotional service of the Lord by bhakti, which is full of spiritual knowledge. In conditioned life, the living entity is forced by the laws of nature to engage in pious and impious fruitive activities, but the liberated position of every living entity is to offer the fruits of their work to the Lord, the Supreme Enjoyer. So this is the natural state. We are parts. Your hand is there to serve your body, not to take its own ideas for. It's part of a whole. We are part of a whole. Therefore, when we offer our activities to God, we become part of a whole and we feel that inner peace. That's why in the 3T path, in my work, I'm always explaining this basic initial concept which is taught by Krishna in Bhagavad-gita, Karma Yoga, which do your Dharma and do that as a loving offering unto Krishna. Offer your day-to-day work. You're going to the office, taking care of the kids, walking the dog, cleaning the bathroom, paying your taxes, all the mundane day-to-day stuff. Yes, you have to do it. Do the best of it. Do your Dharma. And then do that as a loving offering to Krishna. It's a beautiful, simple concept. And then you're established in spirituality through life, which is the only way you can become established in spirituality. Not thinking it's a side thing, not thinking that it's a little practice you're going to do in the temple or in the morning or on Sundays, I don't know. No, it's your whole life has to be like that. That is your state of consciousness. This is the difference between spirituality and religion. Spirituality is your state of consciousness, is what you're living constantly, moment by moment. Religion, okay, I have this ritual, I do this thing, I go there, I give this money, I do this, I offer this 7 times. It's something you do, it's this day, today's a festive date, so I have to. That's religion. But we want to do spirituality. Yoga is about living spirituality. It should be understood that even when the living entity is in a liberated condition, his knowledge is never equal in quantity to that of the personality of Godhead. Even Lord Brahma, the supreme living entity within this universe, acquires only partial knowledge of the personality of Godhead and his potencies. In Bhagavad-gita 4:5, the Lord explains his superior knowledge to Arjuna. Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tavacharjunam tanyaham veda sarvani natvam veta parantapam. The Lord said, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot. O subduer of the enemy. So this is a famous verse from Bhagavad-gita where Arjuna is like, what? Because Krishna just told Arjuna, look, I've taught this Bhagavad-gita millions and hundreds of millions of years ago. I'm teaching it to you again now. And Arjuna's like, what? What are you talking about, man? You're my cousin. Like, we're not even that different in age. How can you have, what are you talking about? How could you have taught this millions of years ago? And he's like, no, Arjuna, I remember all my past, appearances. You do not. This is the difference between God and the individual soul. The term baddha or bound is also understood to refer to the living entity's eternal dependence upon the Lord, either in the conditioned or liberated state. In the kingdom of Maya, the living entity is bound to the cruel laws of birth and death, whereas in the spiritual sky, the living entity is fixed in a bond of love to the Lord. Liberation means freedom from the miseries of life, but never freedom from one's own loving relationship with Lord Krishna, which is the essence of one's eternal existence. According to Srila Madhvacharya, the Lord is the only eternally free living entity, and all other living entities are eternally dependent and bound to the Lord, either through blissful loving service or through the bondage of Maya. The conditioned soul should give up tasting the bitter fruits of the tree of material existence and turn to his dearmost friend, Lord Krishna, who is sitting within the heart. There is no pleasure equal to or greater than the pleasure of pure devotional service to Lord Krishna. And by tasting the fruit of love of Krishna, the liberated living entity enters the ocean of happiness. Very nice. Okay, verse 8. One who is enlightened in self-realization, although living within the material body, sees himself as transcendental to the body. Just as one who has arisen from a dream gives up identification with the dream body. A foolish person, however, although not identical with his material body, but transcendental to it, thinks himself to be situated in the body, just as one who is dreaming sees himself as situated in an imaginary body. So again, the classic example of the dream. So in a dream, you're in all these different situations and you have a dream body, right? Your real body is just lying there in bed, but in the dream body, you're doing this, that, and the other thing. But when you wake up, you're like, oh, okay, this is my body. And that was just a dream body. So you've now have this knowledge. You're like, okay, I'm not fooled anymore by the dream. So they give this, it's a perfect example. So now that we've awake, now you have to awaken again. That's why we call it spiritual awakening. Yeah, that's a perfect term. Because you have to wake up and understand that you're also not this body. You weren't the dream body in the dream. And you're also not this material body in the awoken state here. You're not this either. You're transcendental to it. So this is, Spiritual Knowledge 101. You're not the body. But it's so important. You're transcendental to the body, but you're not the body. You're living within the body, but you're not the body. Purport. In Lord Krishna's discussion of the different characteristics of liberated and conditioned souls, the Lord first clarified the distinction between the eternally liberated personality of Godhead and the marginal potency, that means us, the innumerable jivas, souls, who are sometimes conditioned and sometimes liberated. In this and the next 9 verses, the Lord describes the different symptoms of liberated and conditioned jiva souls. In a dream, one sees oneself in an imaginary body, but upon waking up, one gives up all identification with that body. Similarly, one who has awakened to Krishna consciousness no longer identifies with the gross or subtle material bodies nor does he or she become affected by the happiness and distress of material life. On the other hand, a foolish person, kumati, does not awaken from the dream of material existence and is afflicted with innumerable problems due to false identification with gross and subtle material bodies. One should become situated in one's eternal spiritual identity, nitya swarupa. By properly identifying oneself as the eternal servant of Krishna, one becomes relieved of his false material identity, and therefore the miseries of the illusory existence immediately cease, just as the anxiety of a troublesome dream ceases as soon as one awakens to his normal, pleasant surroundings. It should be understood, however, that the analogy of awakening from a dream can never be applied to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is never an illusion. The Lord is eternally awake and enlightened in his own unique category called Vishnu Tattva. Such knowledge is easily understood by one who is Vidvan, or enlightened in Krishna consciousness. Verse 9. An enlightened person who is free from the contamination of material desire does not consider himself to be the performer of bodily activities. Rather, he knows that in all such activities, it is only the senses born of the modes of nature that are contacting sense objects born of the same modes of nature. Okay, so this is such a hard concept. A lot of people have it's a little difficult, you know, but it's really important. The two things you have to understand to really get serious about your spiritual knowledge: you're not the doer, and two, you are not the proprietor. If you understand these two things, you know, giant doors open up for your spiritual growth and perception and realization. But these two things, you're not the proprietor, a little easier to understand because it's kind of obvious we're not the proprietor because things get taken away from us all the time, you know, nothing's really yours. It's not too hard to understand. It's a little hard to accept, but not too hard to understand. But what is a little hard to understand for a lot of people, and I remember I struggled with this for years, is you're not the doer. Because okay, what are you talking about? I am doing it. Aren't I moving my hand right now? It's you are, but you're not. I desire that my hand move. But actually, what's going on is all in matter, in a different category of reality from what I belong in. You see? So the example I've been using for years now, and I think it works a little bit, is the example of the digital world. So we all have contact with the digital world. I mean, if you're watching this, you must have. So you're watching this on your phone, on your computer, on your tablet. It's a digital device, or your TV, but it's not organic, right? It's not a biological thing. It's a digital world. So it's all zeros and ones. I mean, this whole video is just zeros and ones. And somehow it becomes, you know, this whole screen there with me moving and the voice and everything. But it's actually just zeros and ones. It's just digital energy, right? So when you interact with the digital world, just by pressing the play button, pressing the pause button, would it be correct for me to say that you paused the video? You said, in a way, yeah. I mean, you desired and, you know, you touched something and the video paused. But did you actually pause the video? No. Because the video is digital. So there was an interface between you, biological being, and the digital world. It was a touch screen, it was a keyboard, it was a mouse, somehow, you know, there was an interface. And through that interface, the biological gave signals to the digital. But if the video stops or doesn't stop, it's entirely happening in the digital world. You're not actually doing it. You just communicated your desire, and then it accepted your desire and did what you wanted. And a lot of times, you know, it doesn't, right? I mean, we all had our problems with, you know, unworking apps and, you know, things it doesn't happen, and websites don't open, and apps that don't work, and programs that fail to do what we want, right? So somewhere you wanted it doesn't do it. It's like it's clicking, nothing's happening, you know. If you're old enough, you'd remember like the Windows blue screens. So, you know, just like in reality, like you want some things to do, but it doesn't necessarily get done because it's not you doing it. So I can say, oh, I want to wave my hand. Fine. Now I can, look, it's working, but it may not work all the time. For some people, it stopped working. Any second I could have something and it would just not work. Might just, you know, it wouldn't be here. And you're like, my whole body could not be here in a second. Like, it just might not work, or I might have, what just starts, you know, like material nature won't allow it to work. And I can have desires which are completely outside my scope. I can't, you know, sprout wings and fly off. It's like why can't I do that? Because I'm not the doer. I don't have that power. I can't do things. Because this is happening, this whole environment is an environment of the gunas, of matter. And I am transcendent to matter. I am a different category. Remember we talked about the three categories: Vishnu Tattva, Jiva Tattva, Prakriti Tattva. Three different categories. I am never going to be God. Vishnu Tattva, I am Jiva Tattva. And I'm never going to be matter, Prakriti Tattva. These are different existential categories, different aspects of reality. So everything here is happening in Prakriti, the gunas. I'm Jiva. So I have a mechanism called my mind and body, which allows me to see, to interact with Prakriti. And this mechanism is made of Prakriti. So what's really going on is the mechanism interacting with Prakriti, because the mechanism, the body, is made of matter, and this is all made of matter, so these things can interact. They're in the same category of existence. But I, however, am not. So again, you have your digital world, and one digital thing talks to another digital thing. You know, you're getting this from the server, your phone, your computer is getting it from the server, from YouTube, and or whatever, or, you know, it's just all these, they're working themselves out, and it's within the system, and this chip is doing that, and it's sending this to that, and the other thing, and the screen. That's all the digital world. So they're doing their thing in the digital world. You are not. So you actually have no idea what's really going on. You just conveyed your desire, again, through the touchscreen mouse or keyboard. And then maybe it worked, maybe it kind of worked. It did something according to your desire within the limits imposed by the digital world. But the action is happening in the digital world, not in the biological realm of where you exist. And this is the same idea. So it's kind of the same idea. So you're not the doer, you're not performing, the actual activity is being performed outside. This makes you understand, very important, viveka. This will make you step back from matter, from your identity with the body, and see the world as it is. Okay, purport. Lord Krishna makes a similar statement in Bhagavad-gita 3:28. Tattva-vitu mahabaho guna karma vibhagayo guna guneshu vartanta iti matvana sajate. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, O mighty armed, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the difference between work and devotion and work for fruitive activities. The material body always interacts with sense objects. For in order to survive, the body must eat, drink, speak, sleep, and so on. But an enlightened person who knows the science of Krishna consciousness never thinks, I am accepting these sense objects as my property. They are meant for my pleasure. Similarly, if the body performs a wonderful activity, a Krishna conscious person does not become proud, nor is he depressed by the failures of the body to function in a particular way. In other words, Krishna consciousness means giving up identification with the gross and subtle material bodies. One should see them as the external energy of the Lord Prakriti, working under the direction of the Lord's empowered representative, Maya. One absorbed in fruitive activities works under the jurisdiction of Mahamaya, or the external illusory potency, and experiences the miseries of material existence. On the other hand, a devotee works under the internal potency called Yoga Maya, and remains satisfied by offering his loving service to the Lord. In either case, the Lord himself, by his multifarious potencies, is the ultimate performer of action. So the Lord, through the material energy, that's what the action is really happening, not you. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one who claims to be transcendental to the bodily concept of life, but at the same time remains under the influence of material desire and mental transformation, is understood to be a cheater and the lowest type of conditioned soul. Very good. So let's end here. I hope you managed to get a little more of an idea of this I am not the doer concept. And of course, leave your questions below. I'd love to hear from you if there's something you want to work out. And have your rest of your day with lots of peace and lots of love. Hare Krishna.